Hello, everyone. You're welcome again to my page. And it's time for us to tell ourselves another beautiful story to motivate us for the week. And the title of my story for today is The Prince and the Pauper. The Prince and the Pauper. This is actually one of the best short fairy tale stories for everyone to learn from. Once upon a time, a son was born to the king and queen. He was called Edward, and everyone in the palace rejoiced and blessed the infant prince. That same day, another little boy was born to a very poor family. His name was Tom. His family was so poor that they could rarely had enough money to buy food. Prince Edward always had plenty of food and beautiful clothing. The king doted on his only son and raised him in comfort and love. Tom grew up in poverty and hunger and had to beg strangers for a bite to eat. His father was cruel and mean. Tom was upset and left home and wandered the streets aimlessly until he found himself before a magnificent palace. The guard stopped him from entering the palace. Just then, Prince Edward was returning from a stroll when he heard the guard's angry shouts. But being a good prince, he commanded the guards to let him enter the palace. The prince gave Tom many good things to eat. They decided to swap their places. Tom was hesitant, but he didn't argue much with the prince. The two boys exchanged clothes and they were amazed to see how much alike they looked. Dressed like a pauper, the prince walked out of the palace as he wanted to see the outside world. The guard frowned at him angrily. In fact, threw the prince out of the castle. Meanwhile, Tom's father, who had been searching for him through the streets, saw the prince and thought it was his son, rushed towards him. He treated the prince like he always did with Tom. And in the palace, Tom was little better off. Much over, however much he tried to tell that he's not Prince Edward, no one would listen. When the servants didn't believe him, Tom had no choice but to continue his masquerade. The prince was beaten by Tom's father every day. The prince was afraid of him and no longer tried to argue. As he has made his way through the village, the prince thought about the things he had experienced. He wanted to punish Tom's father, but no one in the palace would recognize Edward as the true prince. Edward continued to go from door to door, but no one in the village wanted to give him any food. Edward kept wandering the village, but he couldn't even manage to get one meal a day. Several days went by like this. One day, Edward came upon a knight from the neighboring country whom he had met before. Once they had participated in a hackery competition together. Grabbing his chance, Edward reminded him of the details of their last meeting and tried to convince him of his true identity. The knight agreed and promised him to help him. He seated the prince on his horse and they rode to the palace together. While all this was happening, the king had died and everyone was at the palace focused on Tom's coronation. At that moment, Prince Edward burst into the throne room. Tom was confused. He knew what his duty was, but he was afraid to go back to his former life as a pauper. Finally, he made a decision and raised his voice above the din. He speaks the truth, Tom declared. I am not Prince Edward. He is. Tom had always been an honest and decent boy. And so Prince Edward was crowned king. He was deeply impressed with Tom's honesty and loyalty. He asked Tom to stay at the palace and even made him a knight. From then henceforth, Tom became King Edward's chief advisor and lived in the palace the rest of his life. The prince and the pauper became as close as real brothers and ruled the country together with honor and generosity, making sure that everyone was safe and content. That is the end of my story, The Prince and the Pauper. How honest are you? How decent are you? There's always a reward when you do good, and good always comes back to those who do good. So I put it to you today, as you go out there this week, I ask for just one thing. Be a man, a woman of honor, and be generous to everyone that come across your way. Don't forget to like, share, and comment. See you again next week. Bye. Love you all.